Curupira was never meant to be a monster. In the ancient oral traditions of the Tupi-Guarani peoples, he began as a boy of the forest, small, fierce, and gifted beyond measure. His name was once something human, whispered only by those who raised him. He was the tribe's sharpest eye in the canopy, the one who could track a deer through moonless nights without breaking a twig. His hair burned bright red even then, like embers caught in the wind, and the elders said it was a sign from the spirits. He belonged more to the trees than to men. But gifts like that breed envy. His brothers, older and stronger on paper, watched him return from hunts with kills that fed the entire village while their own arrows flew wide. They whispered that the forest favored him too much, that he stole their luck, that the spirits had chosen wrong. The betrayal was born in the quiet of the Longhouse, from the darkest corner of the human heart, envy. They didn't want him gone. They wanted him erased. On a night when the moon hid behind thick clouds and the jungle held its breath, they lured him deep into the mata with a false promise of a great hunt. They expected a quick end. They expected a boy who trusted them. What they found was a guardian already half-formed by the forest itself. The fight was not a struggle. It was a reckoning. In the darkness, he moved like shadow and root, defending his life with a fury that left his brothers broken among the vines. But the tragedy didn't end with their blood. In a world governed by sacred laws, spilling kin's blood, even in self-defense, was a wound to the balance itself. The spirits of the mata recoiled. Panic took him. He fled deeper than any human should go. But you cannot outrun the judgment of the forest. The elders, blinded by grief and deaf to the truth of betrayal, declared him cursed. His own father, the page who had once blessed his red hair, performed the ritual to bind him forever. They didn't want justice. They wanted a sacrifice to restore the harmony he had shattered. When they cornered him at the heart of the ancient grove, where the oldest trees touched the sky, the father didn't meet his eyes. He simply spoke the words that twisted flesh and bone. What happened next is where human stories end, and the nightmare of the forest begins. He didn't die. He was remade. But before we reveal the horrific transformation that turned a boy into the sovereign of shadows, hit that like button if you think the real betrayal came from the ones who should have protected him. Your engagement keeps these long-form dives into darkness alive. The moment the ritual words left the page's lips, the world the boy knew ceased to exist. In the crushing embrace of the ancient grove, there was no light, only the pulse of roots and the weight of centuries. Normally, a human body would break under such spiritual force within moments, heart failing, mind fracturing. But the spirits had answered the call differently. They didn't erase him. They evolved him. The transformation wasn't a gentle spark of magic like in fairy tales. It was biological reconstruction, raw and merciless. Folklore describes bones cracking and realigning, his feet twisting backward with wet snaps, tendons ripping and fusing in reverse, the soles now facing the wrong way so every step would mock pursuit. Pain lanced through him as the arches reformed, muscles tearing to accommodate the new direction, leaving him able to run faster than any hunter yet impossible to track. His hair ignited, not metaphorically, but literally. The red strands flared into eternal flame, not burning him but feeding on his rage, a constant heat that scorched the air around him and lit the undergrowth in warning. His skin toughened into bark-like resilience, veins pulsing with the sap of the mata. His senses sharpened to predatory extremes. He could hear the heartbeat of a poacher miles away, smell the sweat of greed, feel the tremor of an axe striking wood like a personal wound. What emerged from that grove was no longer the boy who loved his tribe. The human part died in the agony of reversal. What rose was a hybrid of mortal cunning and primal instinct, a guardian forged in betrayal. He claimed the deepest thickets as his domain, surrounded by the bones of those who had harmed the forest before him. He was no longer a victim of the mata. He was its sovereign. But a sovereign needs enforcers. And the Curupira began to hunger for more than balance. He hungered for the souls of those who reminded him of the brothers who drew their blades, of the father who spoke the curse. If the dark rebirth of the Curupira has you gripped, subscribe and hit the bell. We spend weeks tracing these myths back to their indigenous roots to bring you this level of chilling detail. If the Curupira's rebirth has already chilled you, wait until you hear what his most infamous weapon truly is. Ask the old caboclos in the remote villages of Para or Acre, and they'll tell you the same thing without hesitation. The most dangerous part of the Curupira isn't his backward feet or his flaming hair. It's his whistle. This isn't some innocent bird call echoing through the trees. In the supernatural lore of the Amazon, the Curupira's whistle is a form of auditory hypnosis, a piercing, high-frequency sound that doesn't just reach the ears, it burrows straight into the brain. Modern researchers who've studied infrasound in dense jungles compare it to frequencies around 18 to 20 Hz, too low or erratic for most to consciously register, yet powerful enough to vibrate the amygdala and trigger raw, primal fear. Panic attacks without cause. The sensation of being hunted. Hallucinations of loved ones calling from the underbrush. When the Curupira whistles, he doesn't produce a single note. He crafts a personalized sonic snare. To the greedy hunter, it sounds like the rustle of hidden game just beyond the next tree. To the exhausted logger, it mimics the comforting voice of a child or spouse begging him to follow. To the arrogant poacher, it's the triumphant call of a trophy animal surrendering. It's customized psychological warfare. Once that frequency hits, the prefrontal cortex, the seat of reason and self-control, begins to shut down. Men have been found wandering in circles for days, muttering to invisible guides, their compasses spinning uselessly while the jungle closes in. Some drop their machetes mid-swing and walk straight into thorn-choked ravines, smiles frozen on their faces as if following an old friend home. And what happens when they finally reach the source? Does the whistle fade? Legends diverge here. Some say the Curupira keeps them in an eternal disorientation, a living madness where they serve as silent sentinels, forever lost but never quite dead, feeding the roots with their despair. Others claim the whistle is merely the lure. The real punishment comes when the forest claims them fully, vines wrapping around limbs like restraints, slowly turning flesh to mulch to nourish the soil they once tried to plunder. If the Curupira's whistle has you questioning every sound in the woods, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. We dig deep into these indigenous roots to deliver the unfiltered terror behind the myths. To find the Curupira, or rather, to avoid him, you must seek the places where the forest grows thickest and most unforgiving. His domain is the untouched core of the Amazon basin, dense varzias flooded during the rainy season, agapos where Blackwater meets terra firme, and the labyrinthine trails of the Tapajos and Xingu rivers. These are areas riddled with deceptive paths, floating root mats that look solid but swallow boots whole, fallen kapok trees forming natural barricades, and sudden clearings that appear man-made but lead nowhere. Local stories mark specific haunted zones, the cursed groves near Altamira, where chainsaws mysteriously seize mid-cut, the silent clearings of the Javari Valley, where entire logging teams vanish without a single footprint leading out. But there's a modern evolution to this geography. As illegal logging and mining push deeper into protected reserves in the 2020s, reports of Curupira activity have surged. Equipment fails without explanation, engines overheating in cool shade, blades dulling overnight. Men disappear from camps on moonless nights, their tents undisturbed, radios still crackling with static. Some survivors speak of a high-pitched whine that drowned out the roar of machinery, followed by footprints that led them in endless loops until rescue teams found them dehydrated and raving. Is the Curupira adapting? Or is he simply becoming more aggressive, a living embodiment of the forest's rage against chainsaws and mercury runoff? This raises a question that haunts anthropologists and cryptozoologists alike. Why does a guardian from the isolated Amazon share traits with forest spirits across continents? The Leshy of Slavic lore confuses travelers with illusions. Japan's Kodama echo warnings through trees. Even the Wendigo of North America punishes greed with madness in the woods. Coincidence? Or a shared human archetype, a collective memory of the forest as predator, not playground? We are moving deeper. If you've stayed locked in, you're part of the rare few who crave the real shadows behind the legends. Drop a like to tell the algorithm this kind of storytelling still matters, and comment below. If you heard a whistle in the trees that sounded like someone you trust calling your name, would you follow? The Curupira does not rule the forest alone. Deep in the tangled heart of the Mata, he shares dominion with another ancient guardian, the Capra. If the Curupira is the silent enforcer with backward steps and flaming rage, the Capra is the wild storm, often depicted as a fierce woman or child of the woods, dark-skinned, agile, riding a peccary or boar through the undergrowth, whip in hand made of thorny vines or braided sepos. Some traditions merge them, calling her a variant or consort, but the elders distinguish clearly: he protects the trees and animals with deception and terror, she guards the trails, the hidden paths, and the balance of the hunt itself. Their relationship is one of intense supernatural tension, alliance forged in necessity, rivalry born of overlapping territory. When the forest is threatened by outsiders, they move as one, illusions blend, whistles mix with the crack of whips, and intruders find themselves trapped in a nightmare of endless loops and sudden lashes. But when the Mata is calm, boundaries sharpen. The Curupira lures the greedy deeper with false trails and hypnotic calls. The Capra strikes first at those who disrespect the rules of fair pursuit, hunters who kill for sport, not sustenance, or who leave wounded animals to suffer. Garimpeiros tell of spirit wars that erupt during times of great invasion. In the great floods, when rivers swallow trails and the forest floor becomes submerged, the agapos, the invisible borders between their realms, dissolve. Pink dolphins leap frantically near certain bends as warnings, but the true sign is silence broken by dual echoes, a piercing whistle from the shadows and the sharp crack of a whip echoing through the canopy. To encounter both in a single night is considered certain death. One confuses the mind, planting illusions of safety or loved ones calling from the mist, the other paralyzes the body, vines snaking around limbs like living restraints, dragging the victim into the earth to feed the roots. In some darker variants, the Capra is said to be the Curupira's jealous counterpart, fiercely protective of her own domain, quick to lash out if he encroaches. Others claim they are siblings or lovers bound by ancient oaths, their rivalry a necessary tension that keeps the forest in equilibrium. What is certain is this: when humans push too far, clearing vast swaths for soy or gold, the guardians unite. Loggers report not just getting lost, but feeling watched by two presences, one burning with quiet fury, the other howling with wild indignation. If the thought of facing both the Curupira and the Capra in the same breath gives you pause, drop a like to signal you're still with us in this descent into the shadows. And comment below: if you were deep in the Mata and heard a whistle followed by the snap of a whip, would you run, or freeze? As we sit here in the comfort of the modern world, it's tempting to dismiss the Curupira's whistle and endless loops as mere superstition. But what if there is a biological and environmental basis for the terror he inspires? Scientists who have ventured into the densest reaches of the Amazon have documented several factors that can mimic, and perhaps amplify, these supernatural experiences. First, consider the whistle itself. Infrasound, low-frequency vibrations below 20 Hz, can be generated naturally by wind moving through dense canopy, underground water flows in karst formations, or even the massive volume of air shifting in hollow trees and ravines. These inaudible waves don't register as sound to the human ear, but they resonate directly with the body, vibrating the eyeballs to create optical distortions, triggering the amygdala to flood the system with fear, anxiety, and the unshakable sensation of being watched or pursued. Studies have shown that exposure to infrasound around 18 to 19 Hz can induce chills, unease, nausea, and even vivid hallucinations. People report shadowy figures in the periphery or voices calling from nowhere. In the Amazon's humid, enclosed trails, where echoes bounce unpredictably, a single natural source could craft the personalized sonic trap the Curupira is said to wield. Then there's the disorientation. The Mata's sensory deprivation effect is brutal. Alone in vast, horizonless green at night, with only the rhythmic drip of water and rustle of leaves, the brain fills in the blanks. Isolation and monotony trigger pareidolia, seeing patterns where none exist, and auditory illusions, where wind or distant animals mimic human calls. Add biochemical mists, decomposing vegetation in stagnant agapos releases mild hallucinogenic gases when concentrated, inhaled over hours of wandering. The mind, starved for stimuli, conjures vivid images, loved ones pleading from the mist, game animals just out of reach, safe paths that loop endlessly. These are documented psychological phenomena, amplified by exhaustion, dehydration, and the primal fear response hardwired into our survival instincts. But science falters when confronted with the specifics. Why do survivors from isolated tribes, separated by thousands of miles of impassable jungle, describe the exact same high-pitched whine that paralyzes reason? Why do search teams occasionally find inverted footprints, human-like but reversed, leading in circles around empty camps, with no sign of struggle or exit? Modern cases of loggers and hunters vanishing in the 2020s often leave behind gear intact, radios still on, yet the men are gone without trace, their paths circling back on themselves as if guided by something that knows the terrain better than any map. Environmental factors explain much, yet they leave gaps, details too consistent, too widespread, for coincidence alone. Some things remain beyond the reach of a lab or a field study. If the idea that science can only scratch the surface of these forest mysteries unsettles you, drop a like to keep these deep dives coming. And comment below, have you ever felt truly lost in the woods, hearing something that shouldn't be there? Would rational explanations be enough to calm the fear? The ritual complete, the grove fell silent once more, but the silence was not peace, it was the hush before a storm. The boy who had been Curupira was gone, remade into something eternal and unforgiving. But the price did not fall on him alone. The tribe that had sacrificed him soon learned that betraying one of their own invited a deeper rot. In the months that followed, the forest turned against them. Fish vanished from the rivers that once teemed with life, nets came up empty or tangled with twisted, malformed creatures no one recognized, fish with human-like eyes staring back in accusation. Animals fled the hunting grounds, leaving only tracks that led hunters in endless circles. The strongest warriors, the same men who had once envied the boy's skill and stood silent during his brother's betrayal, began to disappear one by one. They would wander toward the edge of the Mata at dusk, drawn by an unseen call, and never return. Their bodies were rarely found, but when they were, the marks were unmistakable, deep gashes from thorny vines, footprints circling their remains in reverse, as if the forest itself had danced around them in mockery. The page, the father who had spoken the binding words, suffered most. He claimed to hear his son's whistle, not in his ears, but in the rhythm of his own heartbeat, a constant, piercing reminder. Madness took him slowly. He sat by the village edge night after night, begging the shadows for forgiveness, offering tobacco and blood to the trees. But the Curupira's mercy had died with the boy's human heart. On his final night, the elders said the air filled with a high-pitched whine that made the children scream and the dogs howl. The page rose without a word, stepped into the undergrowth, and was gone. They found only his staff, embedded in the earth like a marker, vines already wrapping around it as if claiming it back. The village did not survive long after. Crops failed in soil that had once been fertile, the trees grew in strange, twisted shapes, leaning away from the clearing as though recoiling from the people who lived there. The land became known as Salgado, salted, cursed, uninhabitable. The tribe scattered, abandoning the site entirely. To this day, explorers venturing into those forgotten groves report ruins overgrown with roots that seem to pulse like veins, paths that shift underfoot, and the faint echo of a whistle that sounds almost human. This pattern echoes across Amazonian lore. The betrayer is not merely punished, he is consumed by the very force he tried to control. Just as the shaman who drowned his daughter became prey to her song, the page who cursed his son fed the forest he had failed to honor. The Curupira did not seek revenge for sport. He enforced balance, and balance demands payment in full. If the fate of those who betrayed their own chills you to the core, hit that like button. Your support keeps these raw explorations of indigenous shadows alive. And comment, if your own family had sacrificed you to appease the spirits, would the forest's judgment feel like justice, or something darker? The Curupira's wrath did not fade with the old villages or the scattered tribes. As the centuries turned and the world changed, so did the threats to the Mata, and so did the Guardian's response. Today, in the 2020s, illegal loggers, Garimpeiros mining for gold with mercury, and agribusiness clearers pushing into protected reserves face the same ancient judgment, amplified by the scale of destruction. Survivors from remote camps in Para and Acre speak of machinery failing without cause, chainsaws seizing mid-cut in cool shade, engines overheating inexplicably, blades dulling overnight as if rusted by invisible sap. Men report a sudden high-pitched whine cutting through the roar of diesel, sharp enough to drown out radios and make ears ring, followed by disorientation that turns familiar trails into mazes. Entire teams vanish on moonless nights, tents left standing, tools scattered, no signs of struggle or exit. When search parties arrive, they find inverted footprints circling the camps in endless loops, leading nowhere, as if the victims walked in circles until exhaustion claimed them. These are not isolated tales. Deforestation has accelerated in recent years, carving deeper into indigenous lands and conservation zones. Reports surge during peak dry seasons, hunters pursuing endangered game disappear, their dogs returning alone with tails tucked and fur singed, miners leaching mercury into rivers' wake to find equipment sunk in sudden mudslides that defy geology, soy planters see fire breaks ignite spontaneously, flames dancing in patterns that mimic a child's footprints. The Curupira is no longer just a whisper in the old groves, he is a manifestation of the forest fighting back, a living immune response to the virus of exploitation. In this modern era, the Guardian adapts. Some say he uses the constant hum of generators and chainsaws to mask his whistle, turning human noise against itself. Others claim the flames in his hair burn hotter near burned areas, a literal echo of the wildfires that ravage the Amazon. The punishment remains the same: disorientation, madness, and slow return to the soil. Those who survive return changed, raving about red-haired shadows, begging to be kept away from the trees, their minds fractured by illusions that felt more real than reality. This is eco-vengeance at its purest. The Curupira does not hunt for sport. He removes threats to restore balance, turning the destroyers into fertilizer for the very land they scarred. As long as axes bite deep and rivers run poisoned, his whistle will echo louder, drawing the greedy into the green abyss from which few return. If the modern fury of the Curupira against those who plunder the Amazon resonates with you, hit that like button. Your support fuels these unfiltered dives into the shadows of folklore. And comment below, in a world of satellites and machinery, do you believe the forest still has ways to strike back? The forest does not simply kill. It claims. When the Curupira's whistle finally draws a victim to the heart of the Mata, the end is rarely a quick fall or a merciful blackout. Folklore speaks of a deeper fate, a transition into Servideo a Mata, a form of enchanted servitude where the soul is bound to the trees and roots, forever feeding the ecosystem it once sought to exploit. In many indigenous traditions, the taken do not rot like ordinary corpses. Instead, their essence is absorbed, flesh slowly dissolving into mulch, bones becoming fertilizer for saplings, spirit lingering as a silent sentinel. These encantados de floresta inhabit hidden clearings deep within the untouched zones, invisible aldeas terrestres where time stretches and hunger ceases. The air there is thick with the scent of eternal green, vines form natural shelters, fruits appear without season, and the ground pulses faintly with the rhythm of distant heartbeats. But entry comes at a terrible price. Once you accept the Curupira's gift, a sip from a hidden spring, a bite of forbidden fruit, or even the touch of his flaming hand, you are marked. Return to the outside world becomes impossible. Your body would wither in moments, lungs rejecting air that once sustained you, skin cracking like dry bark. Survivors who brush close to this realm describe waking in confusion after days lost, finding themselves surrounded by faint, glowing outlines of figures, former hunters frozen in eternal watch, eyes vacant but alert, vines gently wrapping their limbs like restraints. They whisper warnings in voices that sound like wind through leaves, urging the living to leave before the Guardian returns. Some legends claim these enchanted ones serve as the Curupira's eyes and ears. They guide lost prey deeper, amplify his whistle across miles, or simply stand as living monuments to balance restored. This is not mercy or cruelty for its own sake. It is recycling. The forest takes back what was stolen, life, energy, time, and repurposes it to heal the wounds inflicted by axes and fire. The taken become part of the Mata's memory, their regrets nourishing the soil, ensuring the next generation of trees grows stronger. If the notion of being forever bound to the trees as a silent guardian unnerves you, hit that like button. Your engagement helps unearth these buried layers of indigenous terror. And comment below, if the forest offered you eternal life in exchange for your freedom, would you accept, or fight to the end? The Curupira's presence did not end with colonial times or forgotten villages. In the 2020s, as satellite imagery maps every acre and drones patrol the canopy, the disappearances continue, and they defy explanation. Teams of loggers in the Tapajos National Forest vanish mid-operation, leaving behind running chainsaws and untouched lunches. Garimpeiros in the Javari Valley report companions stepping away for a moment and never returning, their radios crackling with static that sounds almost like a distant whistle. Search parties equipped with GPS and thermal imaging find inverted footprints circling cleared areas, paths that loop impossibly, ending in thickets too dense for escape. These cases are documented in police reports and environmental agency files. No signs of foul play, no animal attacks, no evidence of flight. Bodies, when recovered, show no violence, only exhaustion, dehydration, and strange expressions of calm, as if the victims followed something comforting into the green. In one 2023 incident near Altamira, a crew of 5 disappeared after cutting into a protected zone. Rescuers found their equipment intact but the men gone, with a single set of reversed human tracks leading in endless spirals around the site. The Curupira appears to adapt to our tools. The constant drone of motors and generators masks his whistle, turning human noise into camouflage. Some survivors describe a high-pitched tone buried under machinery hum, emerging only when the engine's idle, precise, targeted, irresistible. Others claim the flames in his hair flicker near burned patches, a warning glow visible on night vision cams before figures simply vanish. Technology gives us the illusion of control, yet the forest still claims its due. GPS fails when trails shift, compasses spin in the presence of ancient iron-rich soil, even thermal scans show heat signatures that appear and disappear like ghosts. This is the true modern horror. In an age of data and dominance, we remain prey to what we cannot map or measure. The Curupira does not need to fight our machines, he simply waits for us to step too far, then reminds us that the mata remembers every scar. If these real-world echoes of ancient vengeance grip you, drop a like to spread the word. And comment, with all our tech, do you think humanity can ever truly conquer the forest, or will it always have the last word? The Curupira's story did not remain confined to the whispers of elders around campfires. Over time, it transformed, much like the boy himself, evolving from a fierce indigenous protector into a powerful symbol in Brazilian culture and beyond. In the early days, he was a feared enforcer. The Jesuits who first documented him in the 1500s described a being who left scarred bodies, appeased only by offerings of tobacco or cachaca, a spirit to be respected or avoided at all costs. But as Brazil's Romanticism movement swept through the 19th century, poets and artists began to soften his edges. The terrifying dwarf with backward feet and flaming hair became a more whimsical figure in literature, a mischievous trickster who outsmarted greedy hunters rather than destroying them outright. He appeared in Monteiro Lobato's children's tales, blending with other folklore characters in Sítio do Pica-Pau Amarillo, turning him into a beloved, almost playful guardian for younger generations. The 20th and 21st centuries brought the horror back, but with purpose. As deforestation ravaged the Amazon, fires raging, chainsaws biting deeper, the Curupira re-emerged as a symbol of resistance. Environmental campaigns adopted him. He became the mascot for COP30 in Belém, set for 2025, a mythical eco-warrior disorienting polluters and loggers in the name of climate action. In global media, Netflix's Invisible City, Cidade Invisível, portrayed him in a modern urban fantasy setting, red-haired, backward-footed, fierce protector clashing with human greed in Rio's shadows, blending ancient terror with contemporary stakes. Today, he appears in comics, animated films like The Red Scroll, and even memes rallying against illegal mining or soy expansion. No longer just a cautionary tale for hunters, he stands as an anti-hero of ecological vengeance, a reminder that nature fights back. The mischievous boy has become a complex figure, punishing the destroyers while symbolizing the untamed wild that refuses to be tamed. In an era of satellites and climate summits, the Curupira endures because he represents what we fear losing, the forest's last line of defense, wild, untamed, and fundamentally beyond our control. If seeing the Curupira evolve from indigenous legend to global environmental symbol stirs something in you, hit that like button. Your support keeps these stories burning bright. And comment below, in a world facing real deforestation, do you think figures like the Curupira still have power to inspire change, or are they just echoes in the trees? If you ever find yourself deep in the Amazonian mata, far from roads and signals, the old Ribeirinhos and Caboclos won't just warn you about the dangers, they'll hand you a hard-earned manual passed down through generations. These aren't mere superstitions, they are psychological anchors, practical rituals designed to break the enchantment before the whistle pulls you under. First and foremost, leave offerings. Before entering unfamiliar territory, place tobacco, kachaka, or even a simple arrow at the base of a large tree, kapok or samama preferred. Whisper a quiet request for passage, acknowledging the guardian's domain. Many who ignored this step report sudden silence in the birdsong, followed by that piercing tone that makes the head throb and directions blur. Never hunt on certain days. Sundays are sacred to some, others say avoid full moons or the days after heavy rain, when the forest is most alive and watchful. If you must pursue game, do so only for necessity, never for sport or excess. The Curupira punishes greed with precision, leave wounded animals to suffer, and the whistle will find you faster. If you hear the call, high, insistent, sounding like a lost companion or promising easy prey, do not answer. Instead, whistle back in mockery or mimicry. Some claim this confuses him, turning his own deception against him for a brief window. Others insist on absolute silence, cover your ears, fix your gaze on the ground, and walk straight without deviation, even if the path seems wrong. The motto will test you, illusions thrive on doubt. Carry repellents rooted in old knowledge. Salt sprinkled in a circle around your camp is said to create a barrier, spirits dislike the purity of it. Cold iron works too, embed a steel knife or nail in your boot or pack, the metal disrupts the enchantment, much like in European fey lore. Strong herbs, garlic, rue, or tobacco smoke, mask your human scent and vibration, making it harder for him to track your heartbeat through the undergrowth. Above all, never follow an easy trail. If a path appears suddenly clear, footprints leading invitingly forward, or game tracks that seem too perfect, turn back. Those are his false trails, designed to lead you deeper into loops where time loses meaning and exhaustion does the rest. These rules have saved lives, or so the stories claim. In remote villages, elders still teach them to children, blending caution with respect. The Curupira does not attack the humble or the balanced, he protects what was always his. If these survival tips from the people who live alongside the legend resonate with you, drop a like to keep these raw folklore truths alive. And comment below, if you were lost in the mata and heard that whistle, which rule would you cling to first? The Curupira's tale does not end with survival tips or modern disappearances. There is one final layer, whispered only among the oldest elders in the most remote villages, a secret oral tradition that few dare speak aloud. Some claim the page, in his final moments of madness, did not curse his son out of pure rage. He performed a desperate, ancient ritual, one known only to a handful of shamans across generations. He understood that the bloodline carried too much power to simply vanish, the spirits demanded continuity. There exists a whispered ceremony to call the Curupira back to his human form for a single lunar cycle, to restore the boy who once tracked deer under starlight. But the cost is ruinous. It requires the caller to sacrifice their most precious memory of the forest itself, the scent of rain on leaves, the sound of a jaguar's breath in the night, the feel of earth under bare feet. The ritual literally erases a piece of the soul to bridge the worlds. If performed correctly, the red-haired figure emerges from the deepest thicket, not as the vengeful guardian, but as something far worse. The returned Curupira is never the boy people remember. He carries the cold fury of reversed bones and eternal flame in his veins. His eyes remain fixed on the horizon, seeing only threats. His skin never warms. The ritual does not redeem, it amplifies. The forest, having tasted betrayal once, refuses to release its enforcer. What steps out is the personification of the mata's unyielding memory, wilder, more merciless, a reminder that some injustices cannot be undone. You cannot bargain with the Curupira any more than you can bargain with the roots that hold the continent together. The Amazon is the lungs of our planet, but it is also its memory. Every felled tree, every poisoned river, every life taken for greed is etched into its veins. The Curupira persists because he embodies that memory, the fear of betrayal by those closest to us, the terrifying realization that nature is not our friend, not our playground, but a force that remembers and judges. Curupira was not born a monster. He was forged in the fires of envy and sacrifice. And as long as the mata stands, twisted, burning, whispering, his whistle will remain an echo for those who wander too far, too greedily, too carelessly. if you find yourself in the deep green tonight and hear a high note that sounds almost familiar, remember the boy who became the guardian. And whatever you do, do not answer. Thank you for joining this descent into the heart of the forest. Sleep well, if the trees allow it.